Hello everyone, I'm Madame Sensei. I teach Spanish, French, and Japanese out here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Richard Feynman once famously said that you don't really understand something until you could teach it to someone else. And so I'm experimenting with some GLAD techniques, and I find that the more I explain what I'm doing to my colleagues, the better I understand it. So that's what I'm going to do in this little series here. The GLAD is the Guided Language Acquisition Development method. And I'm going to explain how I've been adapting them for secondary classrooms because they're really made for elementary classrooms. They're quite interesting. And of course, you're wondering, why does a language acquisition method have to be adapted at all? Well, let me explain what it is, and then I'll explain why I have to adapt it. Okay. So first of all, there is a lot of the things about GLAD that I like is that it has the importance of supporting the native language skills of the students that come to you. So what this means is, hey, I'm old, okay? I remember what it's like in elementary school to have somebody come in who doesn't speak any English, and I'm sorry, the very first thing they need to do is learn English before you can teach them anything else. And then they're not encouraged to speak their native language. Back in the 70s and the 80s and 90s when I was going to school. It's so refreshing to me to see this changing, because a student that comes to you that already knows a language has a wealth of information that you can draw on, a wealth of prior knowledge. And I do really like the view of that we can tap into this in the classroom instead of discouraging it. So that's one great thing GLAD's got going for it. Comprehensible input. We love comprehensible input. Everything is in context. You're not learning any words that are disjointed or not connected to anything. Everything is in context. There is a focus on vocabulary. And what we have discovered, of course, is that if you teach vocabulary, you are helping every single student in the classroom, not just the non-native English speakers. Every single student benefits from this. And, there is a realization that no matter what you teach, you are a vocabulary teacher. So this is great. And there's a lot of pictures and drawings and color coding, which help activate the memory, help activate understanding, keep everything in comprehensible input. And all these basic philosophies of GLAD are exactly what draws us to us language teachers, because GLAD is language acquisition method, right? So the reason that I find I need to tweak it is because GLAD is a very beloved language acquisition method, mostly out of California, but it is for elementary schools. And it is for the typical American classroom. And in the typical American elementary school classroom, you've got maybe, let's say 30 students, probably 24 of them are native English speakers, and maybe 6 of them are non-native English speakers, okay? So you've got a room of at least, 20, 24 mini English teachers in your classroom. And whereas in my case, I teach secondary, I teach high school, and maybe the students come to me, I've got 30 students in my class, and hey, my French class, maybe I've got a student whose grandfather was from France, and that's why they're taking French. Or maybe I've got someone whose parents come from Quebec, and that's why they're taking French. But most of them don't hear French on a daily basis. My Japanese class, maybe they come to me because they think it's going to look good on a resume, but they really haven't ever heard Japanese before. Maybe they come to me because they like to watch Hatsune Miku YouTube videos. But other than that, they're not really hearing the larger context of Japanese, okay? My Spanish class, I very rarely, strangely, get the heritage speakers. Normally, my colleagues get them. Normally, I'm just getting students who are like, hey, I need a language to get into college, so I'm going to take Spanish. And yeah, I've heard it a little, but, maybe just Dora the Explorer. But they don't really listen to it in the environment. I mean, we do have a lot of native Spanish speakers out here, but until you activate that interest in the students, they're not really looking for it, okay? So I was a foreign exchange student. I know what it's like to go to school in another country, and you're surrounded by the language constantly. I'd get on the bus to go to school, and I'd be looking out the windows, and yeah, I'm really looking at the rice paddies, but I can't help but notice the billboards that pass me by. And, I'm eating my lunch and I can't help but notice the package in my hand that, has some ingredients listed on it or whatever. So it's hard not to be exposed to the language if you're total immersion. I don't have total immersion. I only have the students an hour a day, and I'm crossing my fingers hoping that they're going to listen to French or Spanish or Japanese outside of the school day, but they probably won't. Further, this is complicated by the fact that my high school is on what's called a block schedule. Mondays are normal. You have your 6 classes on Mondays. And then I have after school clubs also. And then Tuesdays, I only have 4 of those classes. Wednesdays, I have 4 of those classes. They're 2 from the previous day and 2 that I haven't seen yet. And Thursday, I have 2 of the classes I had from Wednesday and then the 2 that I didn't have. So it's crazy. And then Friday, of course, is early release, so we can have our trainings and stuff. So Fridays, I have even less time with my students. I do a lot of metacognition with my students. I talk about brain science an awful lot, constantly pounding into them the idea that, guys, I only have you an average of an hour a day. When you walk out of the classroom, you're going to forget 80% of what you just learned, unless I can get you to think about it again, unless I can get you to look at it one more time within 24 hours. We are always fighting Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve. And so this is the battle I fight, and you fight too as a language teacher. And so this is why I'm kind of tweaking the GLAD techniques. Things that draw me to the GLAD philosophy. There's a lot of stuff we already do. It is language acquisition after all. So it's very grounded in pedagogy, and we already do a lot of the techniques. Okay. Number 1, peer-to-peer instruction. Hey, anytime you say, turn and talk, that's peer-to-peer instruction. Anytime you say, I'm putting you into little groups, that's peer-to-peer instruction. Anytime you say, hey, I have a native speaker here, and they're going to help me pronounce this for you, say this for you. We're going to have a conversation in front of you, and now they're going to go around and help me work the classroom. Anytime you have a student who is not a native speaker of the language you're teaching, but they are a native speaker of a different language, and you're drawing on that, that's peer-to-peer instruction, okay? Now, if you're teaching remotely, that's really difficult to do. That's one of the things that was very hard to do during our little remote learning adventure. And if you're doing blended learning, I do know someone who does blended learning where she has her students come in and sit down at the computer and they work at the computer the whole time. They're not going to get that peer-to-peer instruction, okay? But for 99% of us teaching language, we're already incorporating peer-to-peer instruction in our lessons every single day. We love TPR. This is total physical response. This is not TPRS. That's teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling. And I'm going to talk about TIP in a moment, TIP. TPR, total physical response, we adore because we know that memory is kinesthetic. We know that being physical is going to help the students stay awake. It's going to help the students understand everything in context. So we incorporate a lot of that constantly, right? Now, the one thing about GLAD is they like to put in ASL. And I love ASL, but ASL is a language. And I'm already teaching Japanese. So why do I want to teach, here's the word for book. By the way, here's a different language for book. Here I'm teaching French. Here's the word for, it's too complicated for the students to throw in ASL. I'm already teaching a different language. Why do I want to complicate it? So just keep it simple. Use the total physical response that you've been doing. Make up your gestures. Have your students make up your gestures, but don't teach them a third language. That's just too much. Okay? Yeah, you can teach ASL. That'd be great. But when they're at level 0 and they're just learning, it's just too complicated. Keep it simple. Oral presentations. We do lots of oral presentations. We have the students come and stand up in front of the class. We just have them stand at their seat. We just call on them and have them answer things. And we know that presentational communication is the first of the 5 C's of the ACTFL. So yes, we already have oral presentations. Mnemonic devices. Okay, so I have a colleague who is very fond of saying, you can't get to the top of the pyramid if the foundation is crumbling. And right now we've got a real push for, hey, students have a calculator in their pocket. Why do they need to learn with the times tables? Oh, students can look up things on YouTube. Why do they need to learn to change a tire? Or whatever. Students need the foundation. They need to memorize words. There's no way around that. Okay, if they try to use Google Translate and they haven't memorized the words, they're not going to realize when they're accidentally swearing. So we use tons and tons and tons of mnemonic devices. We teach them the keychain method of memorization. We teach them to make crazy connections. You want to stay far away from a lion, loin. If you get too close, you're going to become his prey, right? Well, we do whatever we need to do. We teach them songs, we teach them rhymes, we whatever memorization techniques we need to, we use. Memory palaces, everything. Okay, visuals and sketches are another great thing of GLAD, which we already use. Here is a tip chart. This is term information picture. That's what the tip stands for. Okay, we do that. We do Freyer diagrams. Love Freyer diagrams. Okay, the student writes a word in the middle and they draw a picture and then they make a lot of weird connections and stuff. So we already do that a lot. Oh, sketchnoting. We do sketchnoting too. We do highlighting and we do color coding. Okay, we say, underline all the verbs in red and underline all the adjectives in purple or whatever. Or we do that for the students and we say, hey, all the verbs are in red here. Okay, anyone who's dabbled in the silent way does a lot of color coding already. We co-construct and we co-create. We do this constantly. We give the students sentence frames. We're going to model the sentence for them. We're going to raise one eyebrow when they have a mistake so that they can self-correct. We're encouraging them to self-correct. We do a lot of I do, we do, and you do to absolutely stellar effect. Say it with me. Read it with me. That's what GLAD calls choral repetition. This is anytime we're doing TPRS, teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, and we have the students repeat after us, or we're just saying, here's a new sentence frame, repeat it after me. We do that tons of times. Neurological imprinting. This is another big thing in GLAD that we do all the time. I told you about my colleague who says, the brain is a muscle and we're working on muscle memory. And we have repetition 1,000,000 times. We're doing everything we can to help the students build those neurons. Okay, we do retrieval practice. First thing they come into class, we're like, do you remember what we did yesterday? We have the students get up and move around and do something physical. That'll help them remember. We have them singing songs, chanting. We read in context. Anytime you read in context, that's helping those neurological connections. We listen in context. We get up to and go walk over to our anchor charts and we act like Vanna White and we point to things. We teach them note-taking strategies. We do chunk and chew, which we're going to talk about in a second. We use flashcards. We use spaced repetition. Everything we can think of to help the students. Okay, 10-2. This is, some people call this chunk and chew. Basically, this is you lecture for 10 minutes and then you have the students do something with what you just lectured, because otherwise they're going to fall asleep. And I would recommend, it's not even 10 and 2. I recommend you do 5 and 5 or 5 and 10, better yet. Teach them something for 5 minutes and then have them apply it in a game for 10 minutes. But we do this all the time because otherwise we have bored students. And then we do metacognitive moves, and GLAD has a lot of metacognitive moves. This is a meme I just love. How do you know? Show your thinking, Bobby. We're always talking to our students about, look, guys, this is why it's important. To do this, we want to activate your memory. This is how memory works. This is how your brain works. The more we can do, the more we can activate that, the more relevance we're building in for the students, the more we can teach them about the growth mindset, then the more we're lowering their affective filter. So the metacognitive moves are really important. All right, I was trying to keep this to 10 minutes. It looks like 15 minutes, but coming up, I'm going to break down everything I have been playing with GLAD, and I'm going to show you how my colleagues and I are tweaking GLAD to make it work in the secondary classroom. Thank you.